Hello everyone. I thought we could do some sermon reflections from our sermon on Sunday, and a main thought of that was those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. For example, long ago the Titanic sank and many people died because there were not enough lifeboats or life preservers on board. And 70 some years later, a similar thing, actually an even worse thing, happened in the Philippines when a ferry boat struck an oil tanker and sank. Not any life preservers or lifeboats on board, and over 4,000 people died. Those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. And God's Word tells us many examples about people who had terrible things happen to them because they were unrepentant in their sin. And there were several examples listed in the sermon verses about things from the life of Moses. Basically, the common denominator was this, that the people of Israel consumed God's blessings, and then they stood up to sin because they were not thankful at all for what they had received. Sometimes they consumed God's blessings and then stood up with sexual immorality, having sex however they wanted, wherever they wanted, as though that were not a gift of God given to marriage and those boundaries, but instead was something that they could do whatever they wanted with. Other times the people were not content with what they had, having manna every day, and they didn't have enough water, and they grumbled, and they sat down to consume God's blessings and then stood up to grumble and complain. They weren't happy with their role in life. They wanted something different, something else, and they disrespected the authority that God had placed over them. The sin that is pointed out to us by those verses is easy to see. We too, when we're not thinking straight, when our sinful nature is driving, consume God's blessings as though we're entitled to them, and then stand up to sin, either in the area of sexual immorality or in the area of not being content and always wanting something else, something different, that we don't have it all, and all we think about is what we don't have instead of what we do have. Or we don't like our role in life. We want something different, something else, just frustrated with the way things are and wishing it could be anything else but this. It's a miserable life, really. You can't ever enjoy what you have if you stay stuck there. Where did we see Christ in these verses? I'm going to read for you the last two verses of the sermon verses from 1 Corinthians 10, verses 1 to 13. If you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. There's where we see the forgiveness in God. He is faithful. Even though we have left Him, He has never left us. Even though we have been lukewarm towards what He has given us, He has never been lukewarm towards giving. Ultimately, the best gift He gives is that He is willing to have all the sin of the world transferred to Himself and then pay for it all at the cross, even though He did not deserve it. That's what Jesus did. It's an amazing gift. It never grows old. God is faithful. He would not rest until that gift was accomplished. And as we think about that gift, and not so much at all about what we don't have, then we have a new attitude described by these verses. One of them was already mentioned in what I read, that no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to man. We see this discontent in our hearts, and we say, you know what? There's a lot of other people struggling with discontent. There's a lot of other people who wish it could be some other way, something else. And I'm not the only one. It's not like I'm isolated here. Another new attitude is this. God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. There is nothing that God will allow to happen that will overwhelm you entirely, that you and He can't handle together, that He can't carry you through. And when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. The Lord has a long track record of helping believers to endure trouble. There's the good part about history repeating itself. Our God has a long history, repeated many times over, of taking faithful believers, protecting them from temptation, limiting evil when He chooses to, and delivering them from evil each and every time it touches their life, and then ultimately when He takes them to their heavenly home. What a great thing to know that history repeats itself when you worship a faithful God as we do.